Let me begin by welcoming you, if you're a guest with us, and also let me say just a word of appreciation from my family to you guys at the passing of my stepfather. He was a good man in my life, and he was a father to me when I needed him to be most. And he was a good guy. And so we've had a pretty hard last couple of weeks, and his memorial service was yesterday, and so we traveled home late, and I got to bed about 1 o'clock, and lots of stuff swirling in my head, and I was all jacked up on caffeine from driving. So I probably didn't get to sleep till 2. Normally I worry about putting you guys to sleep, but I hope I don't put myself to sleep this morning. Hey, let's bring the house lights up a little bit so I can see you guys. Well, we are in the middle of a series through the book of Revelation, and it's called Victorious. And we're examining some of the central themes, some of the central messages of the book that are very applicable to us here today. We can understand them, we can know them, we can live them out. Well, in week 1, we were given a glimpse of the preeminence of Christ as we encountered Him powerfully. And we learned that there is a danger in becoming too familiar with Jesus. It's not all high fives and back slaps. I mean, yes, He is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. But He is also the exalted King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who dwells in overwhelming glory. His eyes are like fire, it tells us. He holds the stars in His hands. A double-edged sword comes from His mouth. A voice like mighty waters. A face like the sun shining in its strength. John the Revelator, the one who received this revelation of Jesus Christ, he was the one whom Jesus loved, the beloved disciple. He was the one who leaned back on Jesus at the dinner. He had an intimate relationship with Jesus. And yet in this first chapter of the book of Revelation, when he encounters the risen, glorified Jesus Christ, he falls at His feet as a dead man. The exalted Christ is more than we can imagine. Well, in week 2, we were challenged to love the church honestly, like Jesus did. He had a very strong message to each of the 7 churches. And He called them, and He calls us as well, to be overcomers, to be victorious in His power and in His strength. And He closes each letter to each of those 7 churches with a promise. To those who are victorious, to those who are overcomers, He gives them a promise. And these promises give them hope, and He gives them a glimpse of what the heavenly reward would be like. And it's a glimpse for us that when we overcome as well, that we will eat from the tree of life in paradise, that we'll wear a crown of life, that we'll remain untouched by the second death, we'll receive a new name, that we'll be given the morning star and we'll wear robes of white. We're going to hear our name spoken by Jesus before the Father. And we're going to gain a permanent place in the temple of God. And it even says that we're going to be seated with Christ on His throne. Wow! What a glorious message of encouragement and strengthening to a church that's being persecuted and going through suffering. Well, we got a vision, and this vision shifted heavenward. And we beheld a scene of heavenly worship, and we were encouraged to worship God wholeheartedly with all of our being. Through wholehearted worship to God, we are drawn close to Him and close to one another. And we learned last week that worship centers us on Him. And that worship unites us as God's people. And that worship strengthens us or heartens us in our daily walk of faith. And today, we turn our attentions to chapter 6 and 7, where we're going to find the breaking open of the sealed scroll, which was introduced to us, mentioned to us in chapter 5. If you remember, the scroll was written on the inside and on the back, and it was rolled up and sealed with 7 seals. And as they looked through heaven, no one could be found who could open the scroll except one. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, it says. The Root of David, the one who has overcome, it says. This is the Lamb who was slain and yet standing. The victorious Christ, the Son of God. And as we move from chapter 5 to chapter 6, there is a profound shift that takes place. You see, in chapters 4 and 5, we've just been given a glimpse of the most amazing worship gathering imaginable. But as the seals of the scroll are opened by the Lamb of God, devastating calamities and suffering are unleashed upon the earth. And as each seal is opened, it is important to realize that even in the midst of such suffering, even in the midst of such calamity that would come, God is in control. That He is on His throne. Revelation chapter 4 and 5 is a reality. He is the one seated on the throne. No matter the specific cause or the source of the suffering, God uses the chaos to accomplish His desires in history. And even though at times we cannot understand or maybe even comprehend why tragedy would happen in life, we must recognize that God, in His sovereignty, will use the suffering for His purpose and ultimately for His glory. And in spite of our ability to understand or explain it, God calls us, God calls His followers, then and now and in the future, to endure suffering patiently. And as we examine the message of Revelation 6 and 7, there are three questions from within the text that I want to pull your attention to. And the first is found in Revelation chapter 6, verse 10. So if you have the Bible with you, go ahead and turn to Revelation chapter 6 and come down to verse 9 and 10 is where I'm going to read here in just a second. It comes to us through the opening of the fifth seal, but it is directly related to what takes place in the opening of the first four. Look with me at verses 9 and 10. It says this: When the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony that they had maintained. Pause. Now flip back just a few chapters to Revelation 1:9. Why was John on the Isle of Patmos? Very similar wording and terminology here. John says, well, I'm on the Isle of Patmos. I'm exiled here because of my testimony that I held in Jesus Christ. In fact, all of the apostles at this time, they were martyred for the faith. Only John was exiled. And these who are martyred for the faith, those slain under the altar, are crying out with a loud voice, it says, How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell upon the earth? I'm reminded of a passage, just a couple of verses. You don't have to turn there. It's Psalm 13. Just listen. The psalmist has this same cry to the Lord. How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart all the day? How long will my enemies be exalted over me? How long, O Lord? A profound question for those who suffer, and an equally profound question for those who witness such suffering. Well, let's jump back up to the beginning of our text, Revelation chapter 6, verse 1, and let's open the four seals very quickly here. As the first seal of the seals is opened, we're shown a white horse and a rider who comes forth, and he has a bow, and he's given a crown, and he says that he went out to conquer. This is a powerful image, an image of power and conquering and conquest upon the earth. And then the second seal is open, and it leads to the calling forth of the red horse and rider who takes peace from the earth. And he brings great bloodshed, and he is given a great sword. A powerful image of great conflict and bloodshed and war. This is always what follows the conquest and the conquering of those who dwell upon the earth. And when the third seal is opened, John sees a black horse. And this rider comes forth, and he's holding a scale or a balance in his hand. And John hears the voice. And he says, a quart of wheat for a denarius, 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. To understand, we must understand the context, the historical context here. A denarius was the equivalent of a day's wage. Just a quart of wheat for a day's wage. It would be like going to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread this afternoon. And when you get there, it cost $150. It's an image of famine and scarcity of food. This is an image of economic collapse and ruin, which usually follows bloodshed and conflict and war and death. Well, the opening of the 4th seal comes, and it reveals a sickly pale horse. Some versions of the Bible say an ashen horse. What you need to think of is the color of a very sick person, or the color of the skin of a person who has just died. But this time there's 2 riders, Death and Hades. Now, Hades is just a transliteration of the Greek word, so it really doesn't tell us what that is. All right? So, in Hebrew, the equivalent is Sheol. You've probably heard that word from the Psalms. And really the word means grave, and it references the abode of the dead, the place where the dead live, the Netherlands, or whatever you want to call that. So death and the grave are following. And although limited, authority is given to them to kill with the sword and with famine and pestilence and disease, with wild beasts of the earth. A very vivid image of death and destruction. Now, with these 4 seals, we have conquest or war. We have bloodshed and famine and death. And we can see how each one of these builds upon another. And all 4 of them together personify the reality of evil and the suffering that it brings. It's important for us to realize that this isn't just a picture of what took place in the past, although it is. From the very moment that Abel's blood cried out to the Lord as it seeped into the ground. Or in the first century church, what John and the church was going through. It's not just something that took place in the past. And it's important for us to realize that this is not just something that's going to take place in the future, although it is. And I believe it will with more intensity and frequency. But it's important for us to realize that Revelation 6 is a picture of what always takes place when men ride horses instead of following the Lamb. And sadly, caught in the crosshairs and the crossfire of the war and the bloodshed and the famine and the death, we are not exempt from this. We find the followers of Jesus. How long, O Lord, holy and true? I don't know if you've ever heard of the organization called Voice of the Martyrs, but I want to encourage you to check it out. Google it, as they say. Look up persecution.com. This is a blog that they share that I'm connected to, and I want to share a story. Early Sunday morning on June 1st, 2014, yes, just a little over a month ago, there was a small church in a small village of Ntagara in Gwanza, Nigeria. They'd already started their regular worship service, much like we have done now, when more than 100 Boko Haram militants stormed into the church building. And they shot over 50 people. And they killed 27 of them. How long, O Lord, holy and true? Those who tried to escape, they were chased down by the fighters, and several Christians ran to a military checkpoint almost 2 miles away. And they asked for help from the Nigerian military, and either they wouldn't or they couldn't help. In the meantime, Boko Haram rebels were moving from house to house in the village, burning down houses and killing anyone in their way, including small children. How long, O Lord, holy and true? Well, on June 3rd, just 2 days after the attack, the Boko Haram came back to the village, although this time they were disguised as Nigerian security personnel. And they went from house to house and said, hey, let's all assemble into the church again. We need to have a security briefing. Well, those who believed them assembled. And the 45 people who gathered in the church were gunned down. None of them survived. Immediately afterward, hundreds of insurgents came over the hills to raid the village. They killed anyone that they saw, men and women and children, old and young alike. This happened a little over a month ago. How long, O Lord? Holy, true. The insurgents raided surrounding villages and reducing them to ashes, and churches were bombed, and explosive devices were set to blow up houses and public buildings. Dozens of Christians were killed as they tried to escape into the hills. How long, O Lord? A profound question for those who suffer, and an equally profound question for those who witness such suffering. Now, not everybody endures the same suffering, but that should not blind us to the reality of the suffering of others. We live in such a blessed place, folks. Such a blessed place. And it can cause us to become narrow-sighted, to be very myopic in our view of the world and what takes place in the world. There is suffering, there is persecution, there is death. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 3, admonishes us, God's people, in this way. Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison. And to remember those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. How long, O Lord? Holy, true. Well, God answers those under the altar. Those who have cried out that very question, how long, O Lord? And He gives them a white robe and He tells them, rest just a little longer. To endure suffering patiently. And that eventually everything would be brought to completion. That even in suffering, provision is made for the faithful. God will give them rest, and eventually all things will be brought to completion. Judgment will come, and suffering will end. Well, the vision shifts again in verse 12. From the saints under the altar to the great day of wrath and judgment. And in the fifth seal, the martyrs ask, how long, O Lord? But the question in the sixth seal comes from a very different group of people. When the cataclysmic events of this seal are unleashed, everyone on us on earth, from the most powerful to the least, runs to the hills, hoping to find somewhere that they can hide. These are all those who dwell upon the earth, both great and small. You'll remember this is the terminology that the saints under the altar used. How long, O Lord? Will you not judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell upon the earth? In Revelation chapter 6, verse 15, it says this, then the kings of earth, and the great men and the commanders and the rich and the strong and even every slave and free man, they hid themselves in the caves among the rocks and the mountains. And then they call out for the mountains. They say, fall on us and hide us from the presence of the one who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? The question is no longer, how long, O Lord? The question is, who can stand? Mark Buchanan wrote this. We sometimes say in seasons of havoc and terror and chaos that all hell is breaking loose. But that's nothing, he writes. What is truly terrible is when all heaven breaks loose. And as the sixth seal is opened, there is a great earthquake. The sun is blackened and the moon becomes like blood and stars fall. The sky splits and is rolled back like a scroll. The mountains and the islands are moved out of their place. It's the same description that presented by Jesus in Matthew chapter 24. Verse 29, where He says, but immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Things thought to be firm have come loose. And the very foundation of the earth is breaking up. In heaven, in the heavens above, and in the earth below, all is done for. Now, while the language is apocalyptic, there is a very real end to this. The end is very real. Judgment is certain. Judgment is sure. Who can stand? God's wrath will come, and it will fall upon the unrighteous, those who dwell upon the earth. Now, although the unrighteous, great and small, they try to hide, there's no escaping the justice and the wrath of the one who sits on the throne and of the Lamb. What has been sown must be reaped. As is written in the book of the prophet Hosea, they who have sown to the wind are now reaping the whirlwind. And the writer of Hebrews says this: it is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. For the unfaithful and the wicked, those who reject the Lord, those who are not found in a right relationship with God through the blood of the Lamb, when that great day of wrath comes, there will be no hiding. There will be no escaping. There will be no place to turn to find relief. If you're not ready, let me admonish you. You better get ready. Jesus spoke of all these things in Matthew 24. And He admonished His followers. He says, therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know which day the Lord is coming. For this very reason, you also must be ready. Are you ready this morning? For the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think He will. Are you ready? Or will you cry out with the unrighteous for the mountains and the rocks to fall and to hide you from the presence of the one who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb? For the great day of their wrath will come. And who is able to stand? Now, while judgment is sure, and it is pronounced on those who refuse to surrender to the Lamb, provision is made for the faithful, for those who endure to the end. In chapter 7 of the book of Revelation, there's another shift in the scene. John sees yet another aspect of the vision, and a vision of a multitude of God's people, whether we see this numbered group, such as the 144,000, or whether we see a group without number. We see that these are those who have remained faithful even during great times of suffering and of tribulation and of persecution. They have endured suffering patiently and rested for a little while. And it is here that we find our third question from the text. It's Revelation chapter 7, verse 13. Look there, please. One of the 24 elders asked John, who are these who are clothed in white? And the question is no longer, how long, O Lord, or who can stand? But now, who are these? And the answer is found in the very next verse. He said, these are the ones who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Who are these? These are the ones described in verses 9 and 10 of Revelation 7. After these things I looked, John said, and behold, a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, all the tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. Pause. The wicked cried out in the sixth seal, fall on us. Who can stand before the throne, the one who sits on the throne? Who can stand before the Lamb? Do you see where these folks are standing? They're standing before the throne. They are standing before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, palm branches in their hands, and they cry out with a loud voice, saying, salvation is from our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. Who are these? These are the white-robed ones. Notice with whom they had this in common, the glorified Christ. The 24 elders, the overcomers, the saints under the altars, all dressed in white. They are the victorious ones, the ones who have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And this is a scene to me that harkens back to chapters 4 and 5. This heavenly scene, that knowing that God is still and always has been and always will be on the throne. That even in the midst of suffering and tribulation and persecution, He is sovereign. And He has made complete provision for the faithful. He is just, and all will be made right. No one will suffer, no more suffering, no more pain, only peace and rest in His presence. What a glorious promise. Listen to the last few verses of this chapter, verses 15 through 17. For this reason, John says, they are before the throne of God, and they serve Him day and night in the temple, and He who sits on the throne will, this is beautiful, He will spread His tabernacle among them, over them. Complete covering and protection and provision. They will hunger no more. They will thirst no more. No more famine. No more pestilence or disease. No more death. It's all been done away with. The sun will not beat down upon them, nor any heat, for the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd. And He will guide them to springs of the water of life. And God Himself will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Oh, what a day that will be. When my Jesus I shall see, and I look upon His face, the one who saved me by His grace. When He takes me by the hand and He leads me through the promised land. Oh, what a day. Glorious day that will be. Are you ready? I hope you are.